Hello everybody, and welcome back to How to Renovate. This is episode 26. So in this episode, we are going to be talking about should you stay or should you go? So by this I mean, should you live at home whilst renovation works are going on, or should you move out? So obviously this depends on quite a few factors. We're going to go through some of the main ones I find that clients need to consider when doing a major renovation. So as you probably know by now, everything I teach about renovation falls into my 5-pillar process, and the information in this episode falls under pillar 4, practical management. Let's get into the episode. So should you stay or should you go? So this depends on quite a few factors, like I just said. So let's run through 6 of these now, and I find these are the ones that I've considered when doing major renovations with the family, and also find that this is what clients consider as well when they're about to start. So number 1 is the size and the duration of the project. So obviously the scope of the renovation is going to make a big difference to whether you can live in the property while the works are ongoing or whether you need to move out. If the renovation can be planned around you living there, then obviously you might consider staying, but then you also need to consider how you and your family or whoever's living in your home living in the property during the renovation might affect the timeline. So there's always a payoff. So the scope of renovation and the extent of the work really will determine whether you're even able to live in your home whilst it's been renovated. For example, if your renovation includes major works like structural changes, tearing down walls, rewiring electrical systems, or even extensive plumbing changes, then of course these are going to make staying in the home really challenging. You'll have cut-offs of your services, you're going to have dust, noise, and then potential safety hazards might even just make it impossible to actually live in the property while the works are going on, because it would just be an unsafe place to be. So if your renovation is limited to specific areas where you might be able to live in one part of the home whilst works are ongoing elsewhere, and then somehow swap over once works are finished in the other area, and the works can then start in the area you were living in, this might be a possibility. So you would need to obviously speak to your contractor about this, find out if it's feasible, find out which parts of the house might be livable whilst the works are ongoing, and if those can be sealed off appropriately, and if you can retain services in those areas of the home that you'd be living in, because obviously you need access to some form of a kitchen to prepare meals, you need access to water, to a bathroom, to be able to have a shower, let's say, and then obviously a clean place, a dust-free place to sleep. So if you're able to do this and seal off some rooms whilst works go on elsewhere, then obviously there's potential to live in the home whilst the renovations are taking place. And then we come on to the duration of the project. So a short-term project would be a lot easier to put up with whilst renovations are going on. So let's say you're not doing a major renovation, perhaps it's just a few rooms, it's not going to last months and months. So obviously that's a lot more doable to put up with the dust, the noise, the works while you're living there. But let's say you're doing a major renovation and you're going to have months and months and months of dust and noise and being uncomfortable, then of course you would consider living elsewhere for all or some of the time the renovation is taking place. And then the next one is your lifestyle and your family considerations. So you really need to think about how a big renovation is going to affect whoever is living in the home, whether that be you and your partner, you and your children if you have family, even pets. I mean, you need to really consider how the renovation or how living in the home whilst the renovation is going on is going to affect your family unit or your household unit, because it's a really stressful thing to live through. I've done it a number of times. I have not been brave enough to do it since we had our 2 daughters, because when it was just my husband and me, it was a little bit easier to put up with the noise and the sleeping on the floor and being uncomfortable. But with the kids, it's not so easy anymore. So really think about your individual family members, how they deal with stress, how it might affect them whilst the works are ongoing. You really need to think about how it will affect your lives and if it will be bearable. And then you need to think about the practicalities. So for example, if you're moving out to live somewhere else during the renovation and it's not in your local area, how will that affect your life? Will your school runs become difficult? Will the work commute become longer? Can you work from home? Will you still have access to your support network if you're moving out into a different area while the renovation is going on? Also, you need to be close to your renovation whilst it's ongoing so that you can do your regular meetings and your regular check-ins. So obviously it also depends, if you are going to move out, where you're going to live, and that you need to take that into consideration as well. Also consider the effect on relationships. So I know loads of clients, loads of people I know move back in with parents or in-laws whilst the renovation is going on, and a lot of them find this challenging because it does put a strain on the relationship, obviously depending on the relationship you have with those parents or in-laws, but it can be challenging. So if it's going to put strain on those relationships, you have to take that into consideration as well. And then, as I briefly mentioned, if you have children, if you have pets, really consider how this will affect them. Because living on a construction site, it's noisy, it can be dangerous, it's dusty, because the noise and the dust can really affect their daily routines and make really family life quite challenging. So do take those into consideration as well when considering whether you should stay or whether you should go. And then of course work. So if you work, or you and your partner work from home, let's say, you have to take in consideration how you will work from a building site. Even if you are in a sealed off area, there will be noise, there will be dust, and if the contractors know you're on site, they might be interrupting with questions and answers to certain problems that they might have. So take that into consideration as well. If you're working from home, perhaps you have an alternative place to go to work. If you're living on your construction site, perhaps you can escape somewhere where you can work for a few hours a day, or perhaps you have an office that you can go into. But really think about that when you're working from home, or if you're able to work from home, how living on a construction site will affect that. And then the third thing is budget. So moving out, if you're not living with friends or family, it will cost a lot of money. And again, this depends on where you live in the world. I live in London, where rentals are really expensive. So if you're having to provide a second home, a second rental allocation for that place to live, including obviously whatever bills you're paying on your renovation project and your mortgage, then obviously those rack up really quickly. So it really comes down to also whether you can afford to move out. It can be a significant factor when your budget is tight. So this needs to be carefully considered and put into your budget when you're renovating for your project as well. But then of course you need to take into consideration your timeline as well, because you living on site during the renovation, it will save you money, possibly quite a lot of money. But if you are not there and the builders are free to really crack on and get on with the work, then your renovation may not take as long. So you'll be saving on your timeline and you'll be able to finish on time if you're not there, moving around, if they're having to be sealing off different parts of the home for you so you can live there. So obviously on all renovation sites, time is money. So the shorter your renovation project is, the less it will cost you. So this is a major thing to take into consideration as well when you're making this decision, because you may save money by living at home, but if you take into consideration your timeline and that how that might affect your budget in the long term, it might make sense just to move out and let the builders get on with what they need to do and keep the timeline to what you really hope it would be kept to. And then the fourth one is health and safety. So again, if it's a long-term project, if it's going to take a while, you really have to consider the effects on yourself and your family, the effects of the noise, the dust, the frustration on your mental health, because it's not easy to live on a construction site and have noise whilst you're trying to work from home, or if you're a stay-at-home parent, then obviously that is going to really, really affect things, is the health of those who are living on the site. And then obviously there might be safety issues, like again, the dust, potentially any kind of harmful fumes coming from any materials being used. So if anyone has any allergies or anyone has any asthma, then of course you need to take these into consideration as well, because it is not a great place to be for someone with allergies and asthma to be on a dusty building site. So you really have to think about every single member of your family, think about how they will cope with this, if they can cope with it, and then let all of those guide your decision on whether you should stay or whether you should go. And then of course there are the services that may be cut off. At any one point you may have to turn off the water, turn off the electricity, so the contractors can get on with what they need to do. So think about the frustrations of this as well. If you're living there or you're a stay-at-home parent again and you need access constantly to electricity, water, or you're working from home, then if you're staying on site, you need to plan the days that this will happen with your builder. But again, if you're off-site, then they don't have to take that into consideration. They can just do what they need to do. They can turn off the services when they need to, and they can hopefully stick to your timeline. And then the fifth thing is you and your family's mental health. So I just gently touched on this earlier, but living on a building site is really not an easy thing to do, especially if you have a family. We're all used to our home comforts, having all of our things where we need them to be. And when all of that gets disrupted and turned upside down, it can be quite a difficult thing to deal with. So really think about your family dynamic. If there's anyone in your family who's particularly sensitive to disruption, disorder, noise, all of these could affect their mental health. So really carefully consider whether you're ready, if a family unit can or they are prepared or able to stay on a building site while all this is happening, because it really can affect people. So I'll tell you a little story. I had some clients. It was a consultation client, so I didn't work with them throughout the whole project, but they worked with me briefly at the start. They had a daughter and a son. They bought the most gorgeous, huge Victorian house here in London, and it was a major renovation because the house had previously been, I think it was doctor's surgeries. So it was broken up into little offices, little rooms, and the whole thing needed total gutting and redoing. But they'd obviously spent a lot of money on this house, and they were about to spend a huge amount of money on the renovation. And they had decided that they would live on site with their 2 children, and they also had 2 dogs, if I remember correctly. So I worked with them in the beginning very briefly to give some ideas. But I then later heard that once they got about 3 months into the renovation project, their daughter particularly had really not been able to deal with it. So at first they thought that she would be okay and the family would be okay living in the home, sealing off different areas. But the daughter had a really, really bad experience. She started getting really upset at times, and she was struggling a bit at school. And she luckily had made it really clear to her parents that she just wasn't handling living on the building site very well. She just wasn't coping with it. She was finding it too disruptive, and it was affecting her. It was affecting her behaviour, and it was affecting her mental health as well. And then, rightly so, the family then decided that they would move out of the building site and, for the sake of their daughter, rent somewhere where they could have a clean, safe space to go home to every evening, whilst the builders were then able to just get on with the building work at their home. So I think by considering these things up front, you can make the right decision up front and hopefully prevent someone in your family from getting to that point where they become quite upset by the renovation works or by the situation or by not being comfortable anymore in their own home, because it's really important. I mean, everything I talk about is about creating this home that supports your life. and supports your family life and that works for you. And perhaps you can put up with the temporary upset and the temporary discomfort of a renovation, which will be fine if it's going to save you a load of money. But sometimes people just can't do that. So you need to then adjust your plans. If you've decided to stay and it's not working out for everybody, you may need to adjust your plans, or you may need to go live with family for a little while. But I think it's something really important to consider at the start, before you start renovating, or when you only decide that you're going to start a renovation or plan a renovation. Is one of these really important things to consider, because I found so many people don't think about it until it's a bit too late. They let the builder start, the family's still in the home, perhaps they've hoped they could live in a sealed off area, and then it's just affecting their daily lives too much and they have to move out anyways. So I think just thinking about it from the start will reduce any stress later on if you're caught in this position where you're living on a building site and you don't want to be there. If you have the means, if you have family you can live with, if you are able to move out, particularly for major renovations, then really, really carefully plan it and consider it from the start, because it will reduce the stress not only on you but also on your entire family unit if you can think about it and just make those decisions from the start. And then number 6 is communication with contractors. So obviously, if you are deciding to stay in your home while it's being renovated, it is essential that you communicate with your contractors before they begin. So make it really clear. They should know that you're going to be living in the property. They should be able to seal off an area for you. You need to plan with them, sit down with them, make it really clear what you need. Tell them you need a kitchen area. Tell them you need a bathroom area. Make sure there's a way to seal that off. Can they fit a temporary door so that you can shut the door on the renovation? Can there be some way where it can be kept clean and dust free whilst you're living there? So you need to plan everything meticulously with your contractor, and you also need to know the process so you can know when they're moving on, when they need to be in the area that you're living in, and when you need to switch over to the other area that they've just renovated, or exactly how that is going to work. It's just to minimize disruption to them, but also disruption to you, so that you don't have to be living in a disorganized, dusty section of your home if you can avoid it. So I really suggest speaking to your contractor and then make it really clear what you'll need whilst you're living there. And then also flexibility. So if you decide to stay, then you have to be flexible. I think that's just a given, because you are living in a place that a contractor is trying to renovate and trying to do lots of work on. So you have to think about your schedule. How you and your family living there may affect that schedule, especially if it's big renovation, a whole home renovation, and it does include you moving around to different areas of the house at different points so that the work can continue. That will definitely affect your timeline. So obviously this is a big con of living in the property while you're renovating it. So really take this into consideration when you're doing your timeline and also your budget, because you will have to be flexible with your schedule to accommodate where the workers need to be and when they need to access different parts of the home. Okay, so to wrap up this episode, my advice would be move out if the renovation is extensive. It's a whole home renovation, and if it's major structural works and the renovation will take place in multiple rooms. Also, if you have young children or pets, I would strongly recommend moving out, again, especially if it's a major renovation. And then also if it's a long-term project. So if you know the project's going to take anywhere from, let's say, 6 months to a year, really consider moving out. And then stay, I would say stay if your renovation is not a huge one. Let's say there will be 2 or 3 rooms untouched by the renovation and you're able to kind of seal yourself and your family off in those rooms, then that is a possibility. Also, of course, your budget's really important. If your budget just does not allow for temporary housing, and also if you don't have a support network nearby, your friends or family that you can live with, then obviously that's a major fact. You can't just move out and have to pay thousands on extra rent if you can't afford it and it's not in your budget. So that is a major point as well. And then if you're prepared to live with the disruption, if you can, if you know that your family can do it or you can do it, or if it's just you and you're going into the office every day and you're able to do that, then of course, then you can stay in your property. But ultimately, it is the balance of the effect on you or your family's comfort, budget, the potential impact on the renovation timeline. So take all these into consideration to make the best decision for your renovation and for your situation. Okay, so that wraps up this episode, everybody. I hope it was helpful to you if you're about to do a renovation, and I shall see you in the next episode. Bye for now. For more information on my 5-pillar process for successful renovation, you can go directly to southplacestudio.com/pillars, where you'll find an introduction to the process which covers each of the pillars and what they cover. We also have a number of other free renovation resources. Go now to southplacestudio.com/freebies. I have created some amazing freebies for you there. There is one on the process, like we just said. There is one on planning permission. There is one on kitchen design. There is another one on lighting planning. Go and check those out. There's so much free information there to help you with your renovation.